All right, Math 2 3.4, completing the square. So we're going to go over completing the square, and then we are going to go over solving equations using completing the square, or by completing the square. So something that you always want to remember is you're going to remember b over 2 squared. Okay, that's just something that you kind of have to remember. So let's look at this. Number one, what we want to do is we want to take this z squared minus 16z, and we want to split it up into two things like this, into two factors. So we have z squared minus 16z, and we said b over 2 squared. That's what we're going to have to add here. So what we add here is b over 2 squared. We have negative 16 over 2 squared. That's negative 8 squared, which is 64. So we're going to add 64 to both sides. Well, not to both sides. We don't have an equal sign here, so it's just the one time. Now, 64, factors of 64, we've got 8 and 8. And we can get to 16 really quick. It's always going to be the square root of that last term. You're also going to find that it's going to be this number in here. And we can write this as z minus 8, z minus 8. And we use minuses because this is a negative 16. And we can rewrite this again as z minus 8 squared. This is called a perfect square. And that's what it's meaning whenever it wants you to have that. So it said find the value that completes the square. The value that completed the square is 64. And then rewrite it as a perfect square. We rewrote it there. So I guess we could say that this is our answer and this is our answer. All right, number 2. We have to have b over 2 squared. Well, that is negative 8 over 2 squared, which is negative 4 squared, which is 16. So we're going to add 16 to both sides. Well, I said it again. We're going to add 16. We don't have an equal sign, so there's not both sides. And then I'm going to jump a step in here. See how we grabbed this negative 8 here? That mirrors the negative 8 there. This time we're going to use a negative 4 because that's what's in our parentheses. That's what's in our parentheses that's squared after you've simplified everything. So we have y minus 4 squared. And if you want to, you can take this guy and you can multiply it out and you will have that original statement. Number 3, we have b over 2 squared. That's negative 9 over 2 squared. Ooh, that one's a little bit different, which is going to be, we'll leave it as a fraction. It will be 81 over 4. So what we add here to both sides is 81, I said it again, to the side, 81 over 4. Now this is where it gets really nice to know our secret trick from earlier. We had this negative 4, and there's the negative 4 also. We're going to use the negative 9/2, right? Trying to work that out with 81 over 4, that would be really hard. But if we can remember that we use that last thing in the square, we can do it. We're going to have x minus 9/2. And that's the answer. If you multiply that out, I promise you will get this guy here. These two statements are equivalent. All right, now to actually use it. Solve each equation by completing the square. So let's start off by getting the variable terms all by themselves. So we're going to get x squared minus 10x equals negative 24. Now, just like on the front page they had that blank, we have to add in our own blank this time. We're going to have we're going to have x squared minus 10x plus blank is negative 6, good grief, negative 24 plus blank. Now I put a blank on both sides of the equal sign because if you add something to one side, you have to add it to the other side also. Now what we're going to look at is we're going to look at this left side here. This is now a lot like the front page. So we're going to do b over 2 squared. Well, that's going to be negative 10 over 2 squared, which is negative 5 squared, which is 25. So this tells me that in both of these blanks, I need to add a 25. Now, the left side, the highlighted portion, we're able to factor. We're able to find our perfect square. It's going to be x minus 5 squared, right? I did this just like what I did on the front side, or on the number 1 through 3. And then I have my equal sign, and I want to combine these guys together just by adding them together, and I get 1. Now we can solve this by taking a square root. So I'm going to take a root of both sides. If I can write the square root correctly. There we are. So I get x minus 5 equals, now whenever we take a square root, you always have to remember to have a positive or negative, plus or minus. And the reasoning there is that negative 1 times negative 1 is 1, but also 1 times 1 is 1. And this one's kind of confusing because we have all those 1's. But we have to remember that it could be a negative number here, or it could be a positive number. So, next up, let us, how do I want to do this? There. Just to kind of split it up. We'll take this guy and we'll bring him up over there. We're going to rewrite it separately. So we have x minus 5 is, we'll say positive 1, and x minus 5 is negative 1. And then we're going to solve them both separate. So we have x equals 6, x equals 4. And these are our actual answers. Okay, number 5. We'll start off by adding that 20 to the other side. So we'll have x squared plus 4x is 20. Then we're going to have x squared plus 4x. We add in our blanks now, plus blank equals 20 plus blank. I'm going to do the b over 2 squared part. So I've got 4 over 2 squared. Well, that's going to be 2 squared, which is 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. The left side I know really quickly can factor into x plus 2 squared. I grabbed my 2 from this 2 right there. You can also just go ahead and factor it if you don't remember to do that. But I think it's a lot easier if you're able to remember that. And then this is equal to 24. We take a root of both sides. We got x plus 2 equals, and let me write my root in. Plus or minus root 24. That doesn't look like right. Let me make sure that we're on the right track. Yep. All right, I didn't realize we had to do factoring like this. So next up, I want to factor, or I want to try to rationalize this root 24. So if we remember, we can take a root 24 and we can break this apart into 12 and 2, 6 and 2, 3 and 2, right? I'm just making a factor tree. And then because it is a square root, we want to find pairs. If it was a cube root, we want 3's. But this time we just want pairs. So we have a pair of 2's, a single 3, and a single 2. The pair of 2's can come outside of the root. So this we have a 2 on the outside now. And then trapped under our root, we have a 3 times 2, or 2 root 6. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to say, well, x plus 2 equals plus or minus 2 root 6. Now I'm going to split them up into two different equations. One for the positive and one for the negative. So it'll come up here, and I'll have x plus 2 equals 2 root 6, and x plus 2 equals negative 2 root 6. So I get x equals negative 2 plus 2 root 6, and x equals negative 2 minus 2 root 6. There we are. Just so we know, some people would rewrite this as x equals negative 2 plus or minus 2 root 6. That would also be an appropriate answer. Any of those are just fine. Rephrase. We have to have both of the ones that are in the box, or you can have the single one with the plus or minus in it. All right. Number 6. I see that everything in this is even. Everything has a 2 in it. So right off the bat, I'm going to divide everything by 2. So I'm going to have m squared minus 2m minus 1 equals 1. Now, to factor this guy, I'm going to put everything on the right side, and then I'm going to add in my blanks, and then I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to have m squared minus 2m, and I'm going to go ahead and put my blanks in this step. So plus blank equals 2 plus blank. Negative 2 over 2 squared, because I had negative b over 2 squared, is going to be negative 1 squared, which is 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both of the blanks. On the left, I know that I'm going to have, well, m minus 1 squared. And again, I grabbed this negative 1 there from right there before I took my square. This is equal to 3. I take my root. I've got m minus 1 is plus or minus root 3. And this time I'm going to leave the plus or minus in there. Kind of like how I ended up last problem showing you that blue text there with the plus or minus. I'm just going to put my 1 on the other side and leave the plus or minus there. M equals 1 plus or minus root 3. There we are. And that's our answer.